Welcome back to Pursuit of Passion. I am Chef Jamie Bordonaro, and I am here to provide you with recipes, tips, and techniques to cook memorable meals for you and your loved ones. On today's episode, we have lovely wild mushrooms that we are going to put together with a mushroom risotto to be topped by these beautiful U10 sea scallops that were brought in by Gulf Shrimp down in Plantsville. And we have our ingredients for the risotto. Right here, the centerpiece, if you will, is our arborio rice. It is a short grain rice that contains a great deal of starch. And once we start cooking our risotto, I'll let you in on exactly why it's so important for that starch to help create a creamy risotto without adding a ton of butter or cream. Let's get started with our wild mushrooms. We're going to roast them over a bed of sage and rosemary. Very nice, woody, deep, earthy herbs that will really enhance and enrich the taste of our roasted mushrooms. So we'll set ourselves up for success. We have our landing tray for the finished cut products. We have a little bucket for all of our scraps. The mushroom scraps, by the way, are a fantastic product to save, and you can make your own mushroom stock, which is what I have over here in this sauce pot. The mushroom stock, which will give a great deal of flavor and depth and character to our mushroom risotto. So we'll start out right here with our king trumpet or king oyster mushrooms. They're relatively mild in flavor but have an incredible texture and lend themselves very well to the roasting or confitting process. Confitting would be cooking submerged in oil or a different type of fat. In this case, we're going to roast with some plug rub butter on top of those beautiful herbs. So I'm going to start by cutting directly in half vertically, making sure that the tip of the knife is first to make contact, and that will help guide the rest of your cut so that we don't damage the cap of the mushroom and have a nice clean cut. I'll go ahead and do that with the other. Again, save those mushroom scraps. Make that delicious stock. Your tummy will thank you. Once again, tip down, keeping our fingers tucked in. Safety first. Nice, even cut. Again, every little scrap, go ahead and save it. So we'll do a couple different cuts here. I like to present the roasted mushroom on the finished dish. So some of these will cut like so into thirds. And these nice little pieces will get a little bit of caramelization and all that flavor from the herbs and be a beautiful garnish for the top of our dish, but also, of course, adding to that mushroom flavor. I'll do that with these two. This one's a little bigger, so I cut it into 4 pieces. And just lay it out evenly, spacing them a little bit because we don't want it too crowded when it's in the oven. It will then steam if it's too crowded. The steam will prevent it from getting beautifully caramelized, which is what we're going for. Just trimming this up a little bit. Again, save those scraps. And with these two, they'll be roasted and then folded into our finished risotto. So I'm going to just dice them up so that they give you a nice mouthfeel at the end of the risotto process when you're eating the risotto, but they're not overwhelmingly large that you have to cut it up with a knife within your risotto, which would be quite cumbersome. And we'll just spread those out again, trying to give a little bit of space so that everything can caramelize evenly. Next up, we have our shiitake mushrooms, which have such a lovely umami flavor to them. That's that sort of fifth taste that you probably heard a bit about in media, social media. It just gives an extra bit of savory note to the finished dish. So with these, the stems are a bit too woody, but as I said, save, because you're going to make a beautiful mushroom stock. So we'll just apply a little bit of pressure and use leverage in order to pop the stem off, kind of let gravity and the nature of the actual plant do its job, and it just pops off cleanly. You're not left with any bit of the stem, which again we'll save for that stock. And we'll go ahead and repeat that process with the other shiitakes. Wiggle, 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 pops right off cleanly. There we have it. Now, again, repeating the same sort of process, the same ideology with the king trumpets. I want to have a little bit of this that I'll roast and place on top of the finished risotto, and some that we'll dice up and then fold into the finished risotto. It's just going to be a ton of mushroom flavor from the broth to the actual mushrooms themselves. That's going to be fantastic when it's topped with our gorgeous pan-seared scallops. So this one right here, got a good size to it, so I'm going to cut it into these little wedges, which will look pretty groovy on top of that risotto. Again, space the mushrooms out as much as you can. That will allow the mushrooms to obtain color in the oven and not just steam and become kind of mush. So those two will be our top garnish. And then with these, we'll simply dice, just like we did with the king trumpet or king oyster. Cut it into some strips about a ½ inch wide, and then turn it around to make a nice dice out of it. Very simple, no pressure, doesn't have to be perfect. As long as they're relatively consistent, they'll roast and cook evenly. And here we have our oyster mushrooms. They kind of grow in this beautiful clamshell formation. These are really earthy, delicious, have a lovely, a little bit of a chew to them almost. And when they're roasted, the golden brown caramelization just adds depth to their flavor. With these, I tend to separate the larger clusters. That makes it much easier to work with, gently preserving the shape of all of our oyster mushrooms. And then simply making a cut down at the root to help separate all of them. Again, saving those scrap pieces of mushroom. You're going to really love the stock once you make it. And just in case you're curious, which I hope you are, to make a mushroom stock, you very simply take all of the trimmings that you have from cleaning your mushrooms, bring cold water just above their surface up to a simmer, and gently simmer for 45 minutes, after which you can strain out that liquid and you'll have a beautiful savory broth. Okay, moving on to this lovely blossoming maitake mushroom, also referred to as hen of the woods based on its shape. With these, I trim out the more woody, tough root end, again saving for stock, and then simply separate the beautiful clusters as if you were working with a head of cauliflower or broccoli into nice little portions. And since they're relatively delicate, I'm actually just going to leave these as whole clusters to garnish the dish rather than chopping them up, which would really cause them to lose that beautiful texture and vibrancy. And that's it. That's simple with those. Really one cut with the knife and then simply tear apart with your fingers. So I'm going to make some room on our tray here. I'll probably put about 4 of these. I don't want to overcrowd this pan too much. And then we'll top with our beautiful fresh sage, which goes so beautifully with our mushrooms, the risotto, and are even lovely to pair with scallops. So it's a nice bridge to bring all the components of the dish together. Really important concept that helped to elevate my personal cuisine, and I'm happy to share it with all of you at home. And rosemary as well. Again, same exact function, just super aromatic and earthy. It's going to elevate these mushrooms to a whole new level. And I'm going to use my favorite butter, Plugra butter, and just take these nice little cubes of it, which not only look pleasant, but actually help out in terms of portion control, rationing with the amount of butter you use, because it does tend to have a few calories to it. And that should do it. A little bit of kosher salt, and I season, as you can see, from a height. This helps to spread out and diffuse all those grains of salt so that they will evenly season your ingredients. We are going to go ahead and use a 400-degree oven, roast these mushrooms for about 10 to 15 minutes until golden brown and cooked through. And now it's time to start cooking our risotto. So from start to finish, I would say risotto will take about 25 to 35 minutes, depending on the source of heat you're using. Now, I mentioned earlier about the starch content in our arborio rice. It is extremely important to allow that starch to be released into your risotto. That is what creates creaminess, not cream. If you add cream to your risotto, it tends to overwhelm the palate and take over all the nuances that you work really hard to create, to fortify, to enhance, to create such a beautiful finished product. I will show you the finished product when we see all the work that starch released from the grains of rice does. And I'll also show you how to extract all of that beautiful starch. So we're getting our pan to about a medium to medium-high heat. And I like to start the process out with extra virgin olive oil for flavor, as well as a little bit of butter. The oil also helps to prevent that butter from burning or browning too quickly. We want to keep all of our aromatics, as well as the cooking medium, butter and olive oil, a light, delicate color. So, aromatics. We have one onion that we chopped up nice and fine. You want to try and chop it up almost as small as the grain of rice, if possible, so that they don't overwhelm the bite. We'll get those into the oil as soon as the butter is bubbling and hot, but not brown. Mix them around really nice so that they don't stick to the bottom or brown. And we'll add in 4 cloves of garlic that's been minced. And it's really important with this process that you have your ingredients cut and ready to go ahead of time so that you don't start possibly scorching or caramelizing any of the ingredients before they are cooked. We'll give a nice wipe down to our cooking surface to make sure that no oil or grease gets in the way of the pan to the heat source. And with the addition of our aromatics, the onion and garlic, we add about a half a tablespoon of kosher salt. That will help to extract the moisture from our aromatics and soften them, and also release that beautiful allium flavor that we all love. And once they are now translucent, we can go ahead add in our rice. I'm actually going to add in about a cup of our Boreal rice. And I'm going to mix it around to really make sure it's coated in that olive oil and butter mixture. We're also giving a slight toast to the rice itself for flavor. And then once we add in our first liquid, which by the way is white wine, which will add acidity, depth, and aroma to the finished product. Once we add in that first bit of liquid, I'll show you the exact motion in what I've been talking about with the starch and how we extract that starch from these rice granules. So we've got a nice little bit of a toast on our rice, and now it's time to add in our white wine. So I added in about half a cup of white wine, which is a good ratio for the 1 cup of rice. And in our first mixture, this is the motion that I've been talking about, the most important probably lesson in this video, in this episode, is all about agitation of the grains of rice. So what we have here is a ton of potential in the raw grain themselves. And when we agitate our rice and mix it in this motion, it collides with each other rice granule, and that is what will cause the cell walls to break and release the starch from the grains of rice. All of that starch is then cooked into the risotto, and it will yield you a creamy risotto without having to add in cream for extra calories. And as I said, the cream would also interfere with all the nuances of the white wine that we put in, our aromatics, so we don't want that. So again, just stir vigorously. I like to do kind of an old school method, which is in this figure 8 motion. It just ensures that you remind yourself to stir each nook and cranny of the risotto preparation. We don't want anything sticking and then caramelizing onto the bottom. And we're doing a good job right now of keeping it nice and creamy, and we can see the liquid has evaporated, so we can add in mushroom stock, the main flavoring to our risotto. I'm just going to add in a couple ladlefuls, I would say about another cup. You want to create a liquidy cooking medium that does not drown our risotto, right? We want to be able to evaporate most of this liquid into the actual risotto within a few minutes. And with each addition of liquid, we'll add in a bit of seasoning. This is called layering our seasoning. And don't worry too much about the salt content overall. It's just another teaspoon. Overall, I would say 4 or 5 teaspoons to the entire preparation. But when you think about that volume of risotto finished product, it's really a moderate amount of salt overall. And we got to multitask. We'll make sure we keep our cooking surface clean while we work. And you can see it's bubbling at a pretty vigorous rate, which is a great thing. And we're going to continue providing that agitation and releasing the starch into the risotto. And you can kind of see a little bit how just from gently agitating those grains, the mixture is getting nice and creamy and thick, and we haven't had to add any cream at all or any other ingredients aside from our mushroom stock. And we're going to continue to add liquid. Again, this is mushroom stock to our 1 cup of risotto rice. It's about a 4-to-1 ratio that will yield you a perfect risotto. So we'll put that on the back burner. In the meantime, let's get to our scallops. So these are U10 sea scallops. That refers to their size, up to about 10 of these per the pound. Again, these are a really gorgeous fresh product coming from Gulf Shrimp in Plantsville, Connecticut. And in order to prepare them, we want to keep them nice and dry so that we get a beautiful sear on the outside. I have a saute pan, and you can see the size of the saute pan will allow the scallops to spread out evenly so that we get a nice even caramelization and crust. On the side of our scallops, we have this little muscle here that becomes relatively tough when cooked, so we're just going to simply go from the bottom and gently pull it right off. The bottom of your scallop tends to be a little bit more compact and flat, whereas the top tends to be a bit inverted. That's based on how it rested in the shell initially. And we're going to sear our top side, which will give us the best surface area to work from and get a nice, beautiful crust, and it will be sublimely aesthetically pleasing as well. So we'll just clean these up. Season with kosher salt, again from a little bit of a height. So we'll add in our oil. And you want just enough so that when it's nice and hot like this, you can see it has a nice fluidity and it just coats the bottom of the pan. Actually, you know what? I'm going to remove a little bit of this oil. Too much oil and you start to pan fry the scallop, which is not what we want because it will cook the outside edge that's not being seared quickly rather than getting a nice crust and lightly cooking. So we dry our scallops down on the paper towel and gently put it in, tilting the oil away from you. Again, if it starts to smoke a little bit, just take it off the heat. And that sizzle is a really great sound. That means we have the proper amount of heat, and we're going to start developing that crust. I'm putting a gentle amount of pressure on the scallop. I'm going to lower the heat a little bit. And this is in order to encourage an even browning over the whole surface area of our scallop. Again, just gentle pressure, all about heat conductivity. Back to science class. Drying our last couple scallops, placing them in the pan. Again, apply that gentle pressure. We'll increase our heat. Now that we have more scallops in the pan temperature will cool down, so we'll go ahead and increase the heat to make up for that. Once they begin to become golden brown on the bottom side and they gently release from the pan, that's when we're going to finish them in the ovens. This is a technique called pan roasting, and I find that it gives the absolute best result in terms of the caramelization of the scallop, as well as cooking the outside edge of it really gently. What I'm looking for is a nice textural contrast with that beautiful crust that's crunchy that develops, and then the smooth, silky, luxurious flesh of that scallop, the meat of that scallop that will be silky smooth once cooked to about a medium rare to medium. We'll get those in the oven. And to be able to demonstrate the finished product of our risotto, not to mention a little lesson in reheating. I'll show you some risotto that has achieved its maximum level of starch. To see the finished nature of what all that hard work was. So if you have some leftover risotto, this is a great way to heat it up. You take some of your cooking liquid, that mushroom stock, which I'm sure you've already made some of your own, heat it up, and then simply add in your risotto. And now I'll show you how we're going to finish our risotto to optimize the creaminess and the flavor of it once we get it up to heat. So you can see that particular risotto was cooled down a little bit, and you can see all the starch and the incredible vast amount of starch in there and the effect it had. and how it instantly thickens up our liquid. Here we have our roasted mushrooms. And we're going to go ahead and take some of those ones that we diced up for the interior of the risotto and go ahead and toss those in. They've got a great deal of flavor now, and it's going to add a ton of texture to our finished risotto. The combination of that mushroom stock plus the actual mushrooms themselves, it's going to lead to phenomenal flavor. And then topped with our scallops, cannot be beat. To finish up, we'll add in a little bit more plugra butter and emulsifying in that cold butter into this beautiful hot risotto, as well as an additional pinch of kosher salt to season. That's just going to add to the lusciousness and the vibrancy of our finished product. And we'll take those scallops on out. And that's that crust, that beautiful unilateral cooking. We get a beautiful crust that develops on the top and that creamy, tender, vibrant interior of the meat of the scallop. It's going to provide a nice contrast. We can go ahead and plate it up. You can see our risotto, a beautiful viscosity to it. All those mushrooms in there, it's just going to make for a delicious bite. We'll put that right in the center of the plate as a foundation for our scallops. Go ahead and arrange our scallops as we please, allowing them to shine, of course. Such a lovely product that comes from Gulf Shrimp. We want to showcase it, add in our mushrooms for garnish, our trumpets, maitakes, shiitakes. And there you have it, mushroom risotto, pan roasted sea scallops, and since it is a relatively rich dish, I'm going to add in a little bit of sherry vinegar for acid, just to provide a little bit of that piquancy that will help to make for a more delicious experience. Thank you all so much for tuning in. I hope I've inspired you to get in the kitchen, cook, make memorable meals for you and your loved ones. Please be well on your pursuit of passion. You can check out the links to the episode. Nutmeg TV's YouTube channel will have links to them and put them up for you to view. Thank you to Nutmeg TV for the opportunity. You can also check out the full recipe and a link to the episode on my website, www.pursuitofpassion.net. Thank you so much. Enjoy.
The Saybrook Fish House in Canton has been serving fresh seafood, chicken, and prime steaks for 40 years. Experience one of our 3 unique dining room settings, 2 with fireplaces, or relax in our cozy pub with a craft beer, wine by the glass, or specialty cocktail while enjoying a meal from our new lighter fare pub menu. Serving lunch and dinner Tuesday through Sunday. Reservations accepted for parties of 2 to 42. Gift cards always available. The Saybrook Fish House, nestled at the crossroads of routes 44, 202, and 179 in Canton.